Once again, hello and welcome to Global WarWatch Network. Imagine a world where a nation's most advanced military technology, the really cutting edge stuff, isn't just targeted on the physical battlefield, but it's also targeted through a shadowy, covert campaign aimed directly at its reputation, its sales prospects, and its standing on the global stage. That's the kind of high stakes world we're diving into today. It's a realm where information, or maybe more accurately, misinformation, can become just as potent a weapon as any missile. Really potent. So, we're embarking on a deep dive into a truly fascinating intersection of geopolitics, defense sales, and information warfare. Our insights today are drawn from some recent and frankly incredibly eye-opening findings detailed in an AP News report. Our mission really is to unpack these serious allegations coming out of French intelligence. The core claim that China leveraged both its, extensive diplomatic channels and sophisticated online tactics to systematically undermine the global sales and, critically, the reputation of France's flagship Rafale fighter jet. And look, this isn't just about the technical specs of fighter jets or the economics of defense contracts. No, it's about the hidden battles fought in the shadows of international relations. It's about how a perceived weakness, maybe even a manufactured one, can be exploited to try and reshape global power dynamics. We're going to explore the specific incidents that apparently kicked all this off. We'll delve into the alleged methods used in this information campaign, some of which sound pretty advanced, and then we'll broaden our lens to consider the profound implications this has for international defense markets, for the strength of alliances, and maybe even for global stability itself. This deep dive is really your shortcut to understanding a complex and definitely evolving aspect of modern statecraft.
It really is compelling, isn't it? How quickly a seemingly localized military engagement can just ripple outwards. Its effects extending far, far beyond the immediate combatants. The stakes here are just immense. I mean, impacting everything from national prestige, economic stability, to the really delicate balance of power in critical strategic regions. It just underscores that in today's interconnected world, a single event, even a disputed one, can be leveraged into a global strategic opportunity, or at least an attempt at one.
Absolutely. And to really get our heads around the origins of this alleged campaign, we need to rewind the clock a bit. Back to May 2025. This was a period when India and Pakistan got into this intense 4-day confrontation. We're talking an aerial ballet, really,
Yeah.
with dozens of combat aircraft from both sides mixing it up. And this wasn't just, a minor skirmish. It was characterized at the time as the most serious confrontation in years between these two nuclear-armed neighbors. It definitely raised alarms across the international community. The intensity, the sheer volume of air combat over those 4 days, it really marked a significant escalation.
That's right. A very tense few days. And immediately following these clashes, Pakistan made some, very specific and pretty impactful assertions. They claimed their Air Force had successfully downed 5 Indian planes during these intense aerial battles. Now, crucially, they specifically stated that 3 Rafales were among those downed aircraft. That's a striking claim, right? Especially given the context. Pakistani forces reportedly used Chinese-made military hardware in these fights. Things like warplanes, probably the JF-17, and various air combat missiles. And that detail becomes incredibly significant because it immediately sets up this narrative, doesn't it? Chinese technology supposedly taking down a premier Western platform.
Right. A narrative ready-made for exploitation, perhaps. And as you'd expect, India and France presented a very different picture. India, for its part, acknowledged some aircraft losses. Okay, fair enough. But they very notably refrained from specifying the exact number, or maybe even more importantly, the types of planes involved. That deliberate ambiguity in their public statements, it leaves room for interpretation, doesn't it? And crucially, it avoids confirming claims that could undermine confidence in specific high-value assets like the Rafale. They kept their cards very, very close to their chest.
Indeed, they did. Then you had the French Air Force chief, General Jérôme Boulanger, who offered a more precise, though still pretty somber counter perspective. He stated he had personally seen evidence pointing to just 3 Indian losses, total. And he broke down those reported losses quite specifically. A Rafale, a Russian-made Sukhoi, likely an Su-30 MKI, and a Mirage 2000. Now, the Mirage 2000 is an earlier generation French jet, still capable, but not the flagship Rafale. The significance of Bellinger's statement, especially confirming the Rafale loss, it really can't be overstated. He confirmed it was the first known combat loss of a Rafale jet, anywhere, ever. That single detail, a confirmed combat loss of a highly advanced multi-role fighter, that's a huge moment in the tightly knit world of defense procurement. It fundamentally challenges the perception, maybe the myth, of a jet's invincibility.
Exactly. That first alleged combat loss, even if the numbers were disputed between 3 and 1, Not just a military statistic, is it? It immediately throws a spotlight on the immense value, but also the vulnerability of an asset like the Rafale, which is, as we said, France's flagship fighter. I mean, the first known combat loss of a high-profile modern fighter like the Rafale, even with conflicting accounts that must have had an immediate, almost palpable impact on its standing, especially in such a cutthroat global defense market where, a single perceived flaw, real or imagined, can potentially derail multi-billion-dollar deals.
Oh, it absolutely did, instantly. The striking thing here is just how quickly a single combat loss, even one that's vigorously disputed, with completely conflicting accounts, how quickly that can impact perception in this hyper-competitive defense market. General Billinger himself observed that immediate ripple effect. He said, quote, "Of course, the nations that bought Rafales, asked themselves questions." And that illustrates precisely how quickly existing customers, and maybe more importantly, potential future buyers, can start to have doubts, even small ones. Look, the reputation of a fighter jet isn't just built on its spec sheet, its radar range, or how many missiles it carries. It's built on its combat performance record, or at least the perception of that record. So a confirmed loss, or even just a strongly alleged one that gains traction, that can severely dent confidence. It can potentially jeopardize future sales, strain existing relationships. In this market, confidence isn't just, currency. It's really the bedrock. It's the very foundation of trust between nations and their defense suppliers. A nation invests billions, not just in the hardware, but in the belief in its reliability, its effectiveness, and the prestige that comes with it.
And speaking of that currency, that trust, let's talk a bit more about the Rafale itself. It's not just any fighter jet. It's rightly described as France's flagship fighter jet. This thing is way more than just metal and wires for France. It's a critical component of their defense industry, a huge economic driver, actually, and it's a vital tool for strengthening international ties, building partnerships. Its multi-role capability, they call it omni-role, meaning it can do pretty much everything. Air superiority, bombing runs, recon, ground support, anti-ship stuff, even nuclear deterrence that makes it incredibly versatile and highly sought after. And this is particularly true in really dynamic regions like Asia, where China is, let's face it, rapidly emerging as a dominant regional power. That makes the competition for influence, and by extension for defense sales, incredibly fierce there.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Rafale isn't just an advanced combat aircraft. It symbolizes something far grander for France. It really does. The French Defense Ministry themselves put it quite clearly. They said the Rafale was not randomly targeted. It's a highly capable fighter jet exported abroad and deployed in a high-visibility theater. That means it's being used by allies in active, sometimes dangerous places, which further elevates its profile. This aircraft represents, for France, nothing less than a national image of strategic autonomy, industrial reliability, and solid partnerships. Strategic autonomy in particular, that's a core principle of French foreign policy, right? Their ability to act independently on the global stage. So when you consider that, it becomes crystal clear why it would be such a high-value target for any competitor, maybe like China, looking to weaken France's global standing and undermine its influence. It's a direct challenge to their strategic position, their industrial base, and their ability to project power and influence through these partnerships.
And it's worth remembering, before these clashes in 2025, the Rafale had built up quite a global reach. Pretty remarkable success story, hadn't it? Dassault Aviation, the manufacturer, they'd sold a total of 533 Rafales, according to the report, with a significant chunk, 323, for export. Those are really impressive numbers, especially for a European-made jet competing against the American giants like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and the Russians too.
They are indeed very solid numbers. And the list of client nations is incredibly diverse, spanning continents: Egypt, India, Qatar, Greece, Croatia, the United Arab Emirates, Serbia, and Indonesia. This widespread adoption, it doesn't just speak to the jet's formidable capabilities, but also to France's pretty effective diplomatic efforts, and their willingness perhaps to tailor packages, maybe offer tech transfer or industrial cooperation to meet various national needs. Take Indonesia, for instance. A huge nation, immense strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific. They'd already ordered 42 planes and are considering buying more, potentially a very lucrative follow-on order, a big one. This made them a prime, incredibly valuable target for any efforts aimed at undermining the Rafale's appeal, because disrupting a deal with a nation like Indonesia, a significant rising power, looking to modernize its air force that would have immense geopolitical ripple effects, far beyond just the lost revenue for France. It could really influence regional balances of power.
Okay, right. So let's unpack this alleged campaign. French officials, according to the AP report, didn't just see a few negative tweets or blog posts after the India-Pakistan clashes. No. What they describe is nothing short of a concerted campaign of Rafale bashing and disinformation online. That phrase, concerted campaign, really stands out, and the alleged orchestrators behind this, Pakistan and its ally, China.
Hmm.
This points towards something much more organized, deliberate, sophisticated than just, random public criticism or normal commercial rivalry. It really suggests a strategic weaponization of the information space, intentionally trying to shape perceptions.
It absolutely does. And the tactics they reportedly employed were quite sophisticated, multifaceted, clearly designed, it seems, to maximize impact and spread doubt far and wide. One key method identified was the rapid dissemination of negative narratives through viral social media posts. And we're not just talking about random individual opinions here. These are likely carefully crafted messages, often designed to provoke emotional responses: anger, doubt, fear. They spread rapidly through platform algorithms, saturating online discussions, maybe making it seem like there's a broad consensus against the Rafale when, in fact, it's potentially an orchestrated push.
And then there's the incredibly deceptive tactic of using manipulated imagery. This is where it gets really dirty. Specifically, the French found manipulated imagery showing supposed Rafale debris circulating online. This is such a classic disinformation tactic, isn't it? It's almost textbook. If you can show a photo, even a badly photoshopped one of wreckage, maybe with a hint of French markings, it immediately lends this false sense of credibility to the claims of downed jets. It makes it incredibly hard for ordinary people just scrolling through their feeds to separate truth from fiction. Imagine seeing a blurry image of twisted metal, maybe with a faint tricolor photoshopped onto a fin shared millions of times. Seeing is believing for many, even if what you're seeing is totally fabricated evidence of something that never happened.
Precisely. And what makes this alleged campaign even more concerning and truly indicative of where information warfare is heading is the reported use of AI-generated content. Now, this isn't just about basic Photoshop anymore. It refers to employing new artificial intelligence technologies to create fabricated narratives, audio, or visuals that are so realistic they are often, frankly, indistinguishable from genuine content. We're potentially talking about deepfakes, hyper-realistic fabricated audio or video where, say, a pilot might appear to confess to failures, or a politician might seem to criticize the jet. Things they never actually said or did. This takes manipulation to an entirely new and quite dangerous level. It makes it incredibly difficult for the average person, even for sophisticated analysis tools sometimes, to distinguish what's real and what's fake. It fundamentally erodes trust in everything we see and hear online.
And here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit disturbing, too. They also allegedly used video game depictions, simulating combat scenarios, and then presenting them, perhaps implicitly, as evidence of real-world failures. This isn't just about faking still images. It's about creating an entire, immersive, albeit completely fake, narrative of combat losses. You could have a seemingly realistic dogfight simulation from a game like DCS World or something, showing a Rafale being shot down by, say, a Chinese jet, complete with authentic-looking aircraft models, maybe even realistic combat maneuvers, presented online as leaked footage or analysis. The blurring of lines between virtual reality entertainment and actual battlefield performance, wow. Using a video game to influence real-world perceptions of billion-dollar military hardware, that's quite chilling.
It really is. It speaks to a deep understanding of how to engage, influence, and manipulate online audiences, especially those who might be younger, more visually oriented, perhaps less media literate, or just more susceptible to apparently convincing visual evidence.
The sheer scale and reach of this alleged campaign are also quite telling, aren't they?
French researchers who specialize in tracking online disinformation, they identified more than 1,000 social media accounts newly created as the India-Pakistan clashes erupted. Think about that timing. 1,000 new accounts popping up almost simultaneously. That sudden synchronized surge, all pushing a similar negative message about the Rafale. It strongly suggests a highly coordinated, non-organic effort, not just a spontaneous burst of public opinion. And the narrative being aggressively pushed by these accounts, it was consistently focused on Chinese technological superiority. Subtly, or maybe not so subtly sometimes, promoting Chinese-made alternatives like the JF-17, which Pakistan uses. This directly ties into boosting a competitor's products while simultaneously trashing the Rafale. The economic and strategic intention seems undeniably clear there.
But, and this is a really important caveat, it speaks to the sheer difficulty of pinning these things down definitively in the digital realm. The French military officials also stated that they haven't been able to link the online Rafale bashing directly to the Chinese government. So while there's clear evidence, apparently, of a coordinated online campaign, the direct, undeniable attribution to state actors, specifically the Chinese government itself, remains elusive, at least in what's been made public.
And this raises a profoundly important question, one that intelligence agencies all over the world are grappling with. How do you definitively attribute online disinformation? Especially when you're dealing with proxies, thousands of newly created accounts, maybe sophisticated AI-generated content, deliberately obscured digital footprints. The lack of that direct smoking gun link to a government is a common, persistent challenge in cyber and information warfare. It's almost part of the playbook. State actors frequently leverage non-state proxies, cutouts, or create digital trails that are incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to trace back conclusively to their origin. This deniability is a core component of these kinds of operations. It allows state actors to engage in what we might call the diplomatic dance of denial. They can publicly refute any accusations, pointing to lack of direct proof, even if the circumstantial evidence seems overwhelming. And it means nations on the receiving end are often left fighting the effects of the disinformation without always being able to definitively confront the source. That really complicates any kind of diplomatic or retaliatory response.
Okay, so moving beyond the murky online sphere, this deep dive reveals an even more direct and frankly quite audacious alleged effort. So what does this all mean for the actual real world dealings between nations in embassies and ministries? Well, a French intelligence service actually concluded, according to the AP source, that defense attaches in China's foreign embassies led a charge to undermine Rafale sales. That finding was considered so significant that it was specifically shared with the Associated Press by an unnamed French military official. Now, this isn't just anonymous Twitter bots or fake websites. This is alleging direct diplomatic engagement using traditional diplomatic channels for a very, very untraditional, maybe even hostile purpose.
That's a crucial distinction, absolutely. And it represents a significant potential escalation of tactics moving from the digital shadows into the physical corridors of power. The intelligence findings suggest a very specific and pretty aggressive lobbying strategy. Chinese defense attaches these are military officials posted in embassies, typically responsible for military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and sometimes promoting arms sales they allegedly sought to persuade countries that have already ordered the French-made fighter, notably Indonesia, not to buy more. Think about that. It's not just about preventing new sales. It's allegedly about actively trying to disrupt existing customer relationships and discourage potentially very lucrative follow-on orders, undermining trust that's already been established, and simultaneously they aim to encourage other potential buyers to choose Chinese-made planes. Often, presumably, by highlighting the perceived weaknesses or the alleged combat loss of the Rafale, while touting the supposed superiority or maybe just the cost-effectiveness of their own aircraft. This sounds like a clear-cut dual-pronged approach. Diminish the competitor while aggressively elevating your own product, often in the very same conversations with potential buyers.
That's incredibly direct. A person-to-person influence campaign right in the halls of power. And it's also incredibly revealing how France apparently learned about these alleged meetings. The source states that French officials learned of the meetings from nations that were approached. End quote. Now, that is a critical detail, isn't it? It suggests a certain level of cooperation or at least transparency from these target nations towards France. Maybe these nations, finding themselves caught between two major powers, felt it was important or maybe strategically wise to inform France about these alleged lobbying efforts. It could indicate a strong existing relationship with France, or perhaps a degree of discomfort with the Chinese approach, or maybe both.
It certainly speaks volumes about the trust, or perhaps the lack thereof, circulating in the international arms market when one nation feels compelled to actively report on another's alleged attempts at subversion behind closed doors. It really pulls back the curtain a bit on those dynamics.
And of course, you have the official denial.
Yes, the classic diplomatic playbook again. When asked by the Associated Press to comment on this alleged effort to dent the Rafale's appeal, Beijing's Ministry of National Defense issued a flat denial. They stated, quote, "The relevant claims are pure groundless rumors and slander," end quote. Pretty unequivocal. They then reiterated their standard official line on military exports. China has consistently maintained a prudent and responsible approach to military exports, playing a constructive role in regional and global peace and stability. Now, this presents a stark contrast, doesn't it, between the detailed intelligence findings presented by France, apparently corroborated by disclosures from third-party nations, and this direct, unequivocal denial from China. And this creates a significant challenge for nations caught in the middle, like Indonesia. They're receiving one narrative, perhaps privately backed by intelligence, and a completely opposite public denial from another major power. It forces these nations to navigate this incredibly complex web of competing claims, political pressures, economic incentives, and strategic interests when making these critical multi-billion-dollar defense procurement decisions. It makes their choices far, far more complicated than just comparing the technical specs of different fighter jets.
Which brings us to the really big question, the so what? Why does all of this matter so much? Beyond the specific jets and the diplomatic back and forth, what are the overarching geopolitical and economic stakes really at play here? First, let's just touch on the straightforward economic impact for France. It's not just a few planes. We're talking sales of Rafales and other armaments are big business for France's defense industry. It's a cornerstone of their industrial strength, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. For a nation like France, defense sales are a vital engine for its economy, extending far beyond the immediate profits booked by Dassault Aviation or Thales or Safran. These sales translate directly into thousands of high-skilled, high-tech jobs across the country. They stimulate significant research and development investments, which often drive innovation that spills over into other civilian sectors. And they generate substantial revenue streams that support France's own defense industrial base, helping maintain their sovereign defense capabilities. So when major sales like the Rafale are threatened, it's not just one company potentially losing a contract. It's perceived as a blow to national economic strength, to technological leadership, and ultimately to their ability to fund future defense projects and maintain that strategic independence we talked about. These aren't simply commercial transactions. They're deeply, deeply intertwined with France's economic well-being and its ability to punch above its weight on the global stage.
And the French Defense Ministry clearly sees this alleged campaign as much more than just an attack on one particular aircraft model. They interpret the broader objective as a deliberate effort to strategically undermine France itself, quoting them again. By attacking the aircraft, certain actors sought to undermine the credibility of France and its defense, industrial, and technological base. It goes way beyond normal commercial rivalry, doesn't it? It feels like a direct assault on France's global standing, its entire image.
It does, profoundly so. It's about damaging France's national image of strategic autonomy, industrial reliability, and solid partnerships. Let's break that down. Strategic autonomy, as we said, is key for France. It's their ability to act independently, not being overly reliant on other major powers, whether for military kit or foreign policy direction. Industrial reliability speaks to the quality and dependability of their high-tech manufacturing. And solid partnerships refers to their network of allies and defense customers who rely on French support and technology. When the reliability of their premier military hardware, the Rafale, is questioned, especially through alleged disinformation and lobbying, it directly hits all three pillars of that image. It's about trying to weaken France's influence in global affairs, making potential allies maybe question the strength and dependability of French support and French technology. This is precisely why the Rafale was seen and described by the ministry as a strategic French offering. It's a powerful symbol of French power, French independence, and French technological prowess. An attack on the Rafale is, in essence, seen as an attack on France's very position as a major global player.
And this alleged strategic undermining ties directly into the broader competition for regional influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. That seems to be a key theater here. Justin Bronk, who's an air power specialist at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, in London, he offers a really compelling analysis in the report. He suggests China's objective here is broadly to limit Western countries' influence in the Indo-Pacific. Full stop. So this isn't just about selling their own jets versus French jets. It's part of a much larger strategy to reshape the entire geopolitical landscape in that vital region.
That's a critical point, and it really brings the seemingly local incident, the India-Pakistan clash, and the subsequent claims, onto the grand stage of global power competition. Bronk's perspective is that the Rafale's alleged poor performance, or perhaps more accurately, its purported performance in that specific combat scenario, serves as a tool to undermine its attractiveness as an export. What's truly fascinating, and maybe alarming, here is how a localized conflict between India and Pakistan can apparently be leveraged, almost opportunistically, by a major power like China. Leveraged to advance its broader strategic interests against Western influence, particularly French influence in this case, across a vast and geopolitically crucial region like the Indo-Pacific. China's strategy there is clearly about expanding its own economic and military footprint, building influence, and reducing the presence, the reliability, the attractiveness of Western powers like France directly serves that goal. By making Western defense products seem less reliable, less effective, perhaps more vulnerable, China can encourage nations in the region to turn towards Chinese alternatives, thereby increasing Beijing's influence, maybe fostering deeper strategic dependencies and subtly shifting the regional balance of power. It certainly looks, from the French perspective laid out here, like China saw an opportunity to damage French sales prospects in the region and decided to seize it, aligning perfectly with their broader goal of increasing their own regional dominance and pushing back against Western influence. This isn't just about one contract. It seems to be about fundamentally trying to shift the balance of power in one of the world's most vital strategic theaters.
This whole situation, it really throws a harsh light on the modern landscape of disinformation, which seems to be becoming increasingly sophisticated, increasingly pervasive. It's not just clumsy propaganda anymore. We've seen reports about a general trend of China stepping up disinformation campaigns on global social media platforms like X, Instagram, or Facebook. They're not exactly subtle about it anymore in some cases, and the tools they're reportedly using are truly cutting edge. Very concerning.
Indeed. The methods employed seem wide-ranging and systematic, reflecting a highly evolved, maybe even industrialized, approach to information warfare. We're talking about it, as the report mentions, networks of state-sponsored influencers. These aren't just random people. They operate as seemingly organic, authentic voices online, but are in fact coordinated, perhaps paid, to push specific narratives, often reaching millions of users. Then you have these sites that pose as news organizations. Websites meticulously designed to mimic legitimate media outlets, maybe with similar names or layouts, lending this false veneer of journalistic legitimacy to completely fabricated stories or slanted reporting. And of course, the widespread use of fake social media accounts, like the 1,000-plus accounts we discussed earlier that popped up around the India-Pakistan clashes. These bot networks or sock puppet accounts can create the illusion of widespread public opinion or grassroots support for a particular viewpoint. And this really raises a critical question for all of us, doesn't it? In an age of convincing AI, deepfake, sophisticated bot networks, where manipulated content can be virtually indistinguishable from reality.
How do nations, how do institutions, how do individuals even protect themselves from these sophisticated, often state-sponsored information campaigns? It's a profound challenge for critical thinking for absolutely everyone, from the intelligence analysts trying to decipher geopolitical maneuvers, right down to the average citizen just scrolling through their newsfeed trying to figure out what's real. The ability to discern truth from sophisticated falsehoods, it's rapidly becoming an essential survival skill in the digital age. It's like a whole new form of literacy we all need to develop fast.
Yeah, digital literacy is key. And this incident also really underscores how military sales are kind of a double-edged sword, aren't they? They're clearly not just straightforward commercial transactions for buying and selling hardware. Not at all. They are deeply, intrinsically intertwined with political alliances, strategic influence, sometimes becoming proxies in a much broader geopolitical game between major powers.
Precisely. Think about it. When a country decides to buy a specific fighter jet, like the Rafale, or maybe an American F-35, or a Russian Su-35, or a missile defense system, or even a particular type of warship, they're not just acquiring technology, they're often implicitly or explicitly aligning themselves with the seller's geopolitical orbit. It signals a strategic choice. For example, nations buying advanced U.S. F-35s tend to integrate deeply with NATO interoperability standards and the U.S. security umbrella, while those buying, say, Russian S-400 air defense systems might create different strategic dependencies and potentially complicate relations with the West. So accusations of underperformance, like those against the Rafale, or successful disinformation campaigns that deliberately sow doubt, they can fundamentally impact buyer confidence. And that can lead directly to changes in procurement decisions down the line, which in turn can subtly but significantly shift geopolitical alignments. If a nation loses faith in one supplier, maybe due to perceived performance issues or because an effective smear campaign has taken root, they might very well turn to another supplier. And by doing so, they alter strategic relationships, create new dependencies, potentially setting off a domino effect across the international system. It's a constant, high-stakes global chess match played with tanks and jets and missiles as the pieces.
Which really emphasizes the immense challenge of navigating all this conflicting information, especially for countries like Indonesia, who seem to be caught right in the crossfire between these competing narratives from major powers like France and China. For them, trying to make clear, informed decisions becomes incredibly difficult, doesn't it? With billions of dollars and ultimately their national security hanging in the balance.
It really does. It highlights just how important it is critically important to evaluate sources carefully, to scrutinize claims rigorously, and to seek independent verification whenever possible, especially when national interests, core defense capabilities, and these massive high-value contracts are at stake. Nations like Indonesia are placed in a very tough position. They have to sift through this dense fog of information, disinformation, competing propaganda, diplomatic pressure, all to determine who to trust and where to invest their substantial defense budgets. And the impact of this kind of information warfare, it extends way beyond just lost sales or contracts. It erodes trust between nations, it can complicate diplomatic relations significantly, and ultimately, it can destabilize international relations by sowing these seeds of doubt and suspicion, making cooperation harder, precisely when clear facts of mutual understanding are desperately needed.
Okay, so to quickly recap our deep dive today, we've really unpacked these core allegations originating from French intelligence via the AP report that China launched a pretty sophisticated dual-pronged attack on the Rafale fighter jet's reputation. It apparently started with this online disinformation campaign using things like manipulated imagery, maybe AI-generated content, definitely viral social media posts from newly created accounts, all seemingly stemming from those India-Pakistan clashes and the disputed claims of downed Rafales back in May 2025. And then it allegedly escalated to a much more direct diplomatic offensive, with claims of Chinese embassy defense attaches actively lobbying countries, notably Indonesia, to halt further Rafale purchases and instead consider Chinese alternatives.
Right. And we've seen the incredibly high stakes involved here. This isn't just about, one type of aircraft or few potentially missed sales contracts for France's defense industry, important as that is to them. No, the allegation implies an effort to undermine France's strategic partnerships, its credibility as a reliable supplier, and its overall image on the global stage. Particularly in these really vital contested regions like the Indo-Pacific. It's framed as a battle for influence, for credibility, and potentially for the future shape of international alliances, played out across these digital battlefields we've discussed, and also in quiet diplomatic meeting rooms.
It truly is a fascinating and maybe slightly unnerving picture of modern conflict. So, for you, our listener, maybe here's a provocative thought to mull over. The battlefield has clearly expanded, hasn't it? Beyond traditional domains like land, sea, air, and space, to now definitively include the information space. A space where perception, skillfully manipulated, can truly be as powerful, maybe sometimes more powerful, than actual kinetic performance or technical specs. So, in a world where nations seem to be fighting to defend the reputation of their military machines almost as fiercely as they fight with those machines, what does this really mean for global trust? For the sanctity and reliability of alliances, and maybe for the very future of international relations? How will nations adapt their defense strategies, their intelligence gathering, even their public diplomacy to effectively counter these invisible, insidious wars of influence and information?
It's a huge question, and it's one that will undoubtedly shape global dynamics, global competition, and international security for years, probably decades, to come. It forces every nation, really, to reevaluate how they protect their interests, not just physically, but also in this increasingly complex information environment.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. If you found this discussion as fascinating and maybe as thought-provoking as we did, please do make sure to like this, subscribe to the channel, and definitely share your thoughts in the comment section below. We really do love hearing from you and reading your perspectives. Until next time, stay informed.